is Lupita.
My name is Esmeralda.
And today we're going to be talking about the book 1984, the discussion of propaganda, as well as real-life footage from Oceana itself. But before we get started, let's talk about Austin McBroom. Have you seen what he's been posting lately?
I've seen it. Did you see the song he made with DVD?
Oh my goodness, it's so weird. Like, it's so crazy that people are actually believe it. Like, it's just online. But talking about propaganda, let's talk about the book 1984 by George Orwell. Have you been reading the book?
Yes, I believe. It's insane how the bombs and the chocolate rations are being cut.
I know, it's crazy, right? Well, we actually have George Orwell here, so please give it up for George Orwell.
Thank you.
So please tell us about the book.
So the book is a startlingly original and haunting novel that creates an imaginary world that is completely convincing from the first sentence to the last 4 words.
Wow, well thank you so much. Well, that's all the time we have for you, Mr. George Orwell. Well, thank you for coming out.
Thank you for having me.
So I personally think that the number of people that actually believe what the telescreen says and what they hear from it, I believe that number is really low, because I know for sure that people like O'Brien, Julia, and Winston don't believe what Oceana's propaganda is. On the other hand, there are people like the lady who was singing so happily outside an antique shop that may believe in the propaganda Oceana has to share. But just in general, Oceana citizens, whether they believe in the propaganda or not, just together they're just genuinely scared about being vaporized, so they live their life a lie. I personally made a connection with this and religion. I've seen and heard people preach about Bible verses and also just preaching about their faith. Although I personally dislike when some people post pictures of flames representing the fires of hell, which makes me nervous. As a Catholic, I fear these things as well because of the stories that I heard growing up, but now mainly because of what I see on social media, like on Instagram and the TikToks I see after midnight. I know as a faithful person, a factor of our religion is to share about our faith. Although unlike some Christians, I don't feel comfortable threatening people about hell. The New York Times actually shares how we can dismiss today's falsehoods and propagandas. We can ask ourselves questions like, who is the author and what evidence is on the works cited link with that website? Or what do other sources say, meaning that we would actually have to go out of our way to look up the same thing online and make sure that the actual link is pretty legit. But although the safeguards I feel that prevent us from propaganda happening in our own society are not necessarily people but books itself. Books like 1984, which openly discuss about propaganda, or The Handmaid's Tale, emphasizing being watched and powerless women, or To Kill a Mockingbird, which states racism. The Washington Post shares that the book To Kill a Mockingbird was actually banned because of the offensive language used in the book, but then also it was brought back because of how honest the racism was portrayed. These books were once banned for a reason, and they state the truth of what society was before, whether it was here or in other countries, just to prevent us from having history repeat itself. Unfortunately, the only danger people are consuming and believing fake news are people themselves. Today we are so gullible to believe anything just because what we see on our screens.
People in Oceana do not really believe the telescreens. I believe that people are just gaslighting themselves in order to comfort themselves with a false truth. I think that people can feel that it is not right in some way, that there is bound to be a civil war to fight for their rights. The safeguards that are present in order to prevent this is that Oceana is always at war. The war is really a peace for the people of Oceana by helping the people turn a blind eye to the real issues, such as that of the ministry's real intentions. By redirecting the people's attentions to a war that they are not currently in, preventing them from seeing the questionable actions of the ministry. They are really effective because people felt comforted by the false truth, rather than the truth of what's really going on. Connecting back on the article, How Fiction Becomes Fact on Social Media, the New York Times, Mr. Kinley says, my experience is that once this stuff gets going, people just pass these stories on without even necessarily stopping to read them. Now, and how they are not questioning the ministries and just believing it because it is easy. connecting to how social media plays a part in the same way the ministries did in 1984. It is very dangerous in believing these falsehoods, which can lead to some very biased decisions that can be harmful, like that of the coronavirus pandemic. As said in the article, How to Deal with Misinformation, the New York Times says, whatever the label, it can be harmful, especially now that it is being produced through the lens of several emotionally charged events. It can severely affect the reaction of people in a negative way.
I really like your answer, Esma.
I really liked your answer too.
Thank you. So now we have reporting live from Oceania itself. We have Jalen presenting.
As a citizen of Oceania, I get all my news information off my telescreen issued by the party. The show starts 6 p.m. every night, and I'm in my living room in my house, first to watch, first viewer. Although I do know I fall into propaganda because I don't ever do my own fact checks, but who am I to question the government? I trust my government to tell me only facts and stuff that only I should, and stuff that's gonna help me in society and be aware of what's going on in the world. If I did want to go against the propaganda, I would start doing my own research, such as browsing other news channels. I would also start going to the library, surveying others, traveling. I would pick up traveling as a hobby. I would also read other news articles, and throughout it all, I believe my government wouldn't lie to me. I believe my government is only doing the best to provide for me and to keep me aware. Thank you to everyone.
I believe most people in Oceania believe what they see and hear on the telescreen. This is because they were raised to trust in their government and believe that they are with good intention and knowledge, therefore trustworthy and reliable. This means that people of Oceania will forever believe all falsehoods and propagandas proposed by their government. Those who question the so-called facts will face imprisonment, death, or be voided. In our society, our freedom of speech in reality is limited. Varying on the situation, you can be held accountable for spreading false information. Those who spread information that harm the tranquility of our nation will face the same fate as those of Oceania. These methods are indeed effective because no one will question it, as they fear if they do, they may be voided next. False information puts people in danger, as it could cause physical harm, hatred, and oblivion. An example of this is in the video and article linked below, where a 19-year-old girl claimed to have gotten pulled over for drinking while driving and was let off with a warning rather than a ticket. She said this officer asked for her cell phone number and for her to go on a date with him as well. This video received backlash, and netizens tracked down the officer, who almost lost his job as a result. The misinformation she spread almost cost the officer his job. From this, his body cam footage was released to the public, showing all her accusations being false. The 19-year-old then began receiving hate and even death threats due to her actions. Ultimately, this emotionally and reputationally harmed both the 19-year-old woman and the officer. But not many people are as lucky. Others have to suffer living a shorter life. As stated in the article by Nebraska Medicine, medical misinformation is killing people, according to the head of the FDA, or the Food and Drug Administration. Dr. Robert Califf blames misinformation and disinformation about public health for the fact that life expectancy in the U.S. is between 3 and 5 years lower than it is in other high-income countries. This shows how the spread of false medical information blindly and physically affects citizens of the United States.
Thank you for watching. Have a good night, LA.